Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the ones that are public squares, not only are they public accommodations, and I believe that you can justify, even on libertarian grounds, to require, to mandate that they don't discriminate, not just on the basis of sex and ethnicity and sexual orientation and age and so forth, but also on the basis of politics. And of course, they can still always opt out by becoming a private club or something like this. Not only do I believe that that's the case, but I think there's a good justification, even from a libertarian angle, that they should be mandated to be non-discriminating on the basis of political position, purely because of the risks of inevitable government interference. Now, or especially certainly for large such companies. Now, for example, let me give you another example. As a libertarian, there are still places where one can, for certain, I think, reasonable justifications, say that the state shouldn't allow certain kinds of contracts to occur. And, for example, slave contracts and murder contracts and things along these lines. In principle, I think people should be allowed to say, okay, here, I'm going to contractually agree to be your slave or to even be murdered, and then you give $1 million to my family, or, things along these lines. You could argue that were you convinced that both sides are in fact not being coerced into it, then they're all adults and they're full moral agents, and there's no issues along these lines, then they should be allowed to do this sort of thing. You may be against the idea of it, against the ethicality. I'm against prostitution in the sense that I wouldn't advise family and friends or anybody that knows it's not necessarily a good kind of life to aim toward. But I'm totally against the government banning things just because I don't think it's a good lifestyle choice. And this would be a bad lifestyle choice as well. Don't sign away and sort of choose to enter such a contract. But generally speaking, people ought to be allowed to engage in contracts that you wouldn't engage in. But in these cases, the chances that they're abused, both by potentially organized crime, but also just the federal government themselves, can be in an abusive, using these against their populace and against targets and their enemies. And so it's the kind of thing that you might just say, look, as it's so prone to abuse, both by other people, large organizations, and especially the government, that you wouldn't even want to allow this to happen. And I think that allowing private enterprise to engage in public accommodations, and especially cases where they're the public square and they're claiming to be a public square rather than a magazine, then in those cases, because of the risks involved with inevitable government coercion, however subtle it may be, and it's going to be inevitable. A lot of these places are going to feel coerced, even if the government is trying its best to not make them feel coerced. They're invariably under pressure to bend and look like they're on the side of the current administration that's in there, or whoever really is in charge in terms of the deep state. They are going to bend to promote that narrative at the expense of the other, to stay on good terms. All board of directors are going to subtly do that, either on purpose or just going to end up being selected for over time as they push towards that. So again, I think that there's strong arguments to make it to not, if they're public accommodations, public squares shouldn't be able to discriminate, even from a libertarian perspective. They can always back out, become a private club, so to speak, but they should be disallowed from doing that, and not just because it's wrong, and not just because free expression is important, but also because the risks in terms of federal abuse are so great. And that was your Science Moment. Go give us a look. Our Free Expression Institute, and the kinds of things that we're doing at Free Expression, at the freex.group, studying the large-scale emergent phenomena that governs society, governs social media, governs how the flow of information occurs in networks, and how it breaks down when censorship occurs. That was your Science Moment.